Hi guys, the case I'm going to be looking into today is the case of Sneha Phillips. Now, I just want to put a disclaimer in here straight away. I've seen people in videos, I've watched quite a few of them, and interviews and things like that. Some people call her Sneha, and some people call her Sneha. From what I can gather, it's pronounced more Sneha, but I'm not sure. So I just want to put that out there right now, that I've seen lots of different people do it in those two different ways. No idea which is correct, so I profusely apologize if I'm pronouncing her name wrong, but I'm just going with the more prevalent of the ones. I've not seen any interviews with her parents or anything like that to actually confirm how her name is pronounced, but it is spelled Sneha. So yeah. Sneha Anne Phillips was born on the 7th of October in 1969. She was actually born in India, and she lived there for a little bit with her parents until they moved to the US and they went to New York. Don't really know much about childhood, but I do know that she went to high school, graduated, and then went to Johns Hopkins University. I believe her father was a doctor, and she was basically following in his footsteps, and she would end up becoming a doctor herself. She went to a school of medicine in 1995, and this is where she met a guy called Ron Lieberman, who would end up becoming her husband. He was also a medical student there at the time, but he was a year behind Sneha. They hit it off, they began dating, and they would both do, loads of things together. Sneha really loved painting, and they just really got on very well together. Now, because he was a year behind her, she actually decided that she wanted to graduate at the same time, so off she takes a gap year essentially and jets off to Italy, where she pretty much becomes like a semi-permanent tourist for the next year. Then she flies back and they can both graduate together, which they did. They ended up getting married in 2000. And they had a beautiful ceremony which combined both their beliefs. It had like Indian background as well as Jewish backgrounds, and it was just a lovely ceremony. So Ron gets an internship at Jacobi Medical Center, and Sneha gets an internship at Cabrini Medical Center, and both of them end up getting this apartment together, which was just 2 blocks away from the World Trade Center. She also lived very close to her brother, I believe. He was like 2 blocks away, so, they were quite close to family there. And I believe that her parents lived close by too. Sneha had some things in her life that were kind of spiraling. She ended up getting, fired, but not fired. Not fired on the spot. Basically, every year of like an internship, you get your contract renewed. Right, so they basically said, we're not going to renew your contract at the end of when it's up because of what they stated as extreme tardiness. She was late all the time, and problems with alcohol. So basically they were just not going to have her back once her term had finished. Her parents did dispute this. They said that she wasn't let go because of any of those reasons. It was because she was a whistleblower because of sort of racism and things like that, and sexualism. That's not a word, but you know what I mean. Within the company, and that she was trying to highlight it all, and that's why they let her go. But the hospital, not the company, actually did claim that they had no reports of anything from Sneha. So, don't know what's what on that, but that's what her parents said. So from that, she heads to like a bar to have some drinks with her friends, and apparently some guy ends up inappropriately groping her, grabbing her, something sexually, you know what I mean. And she then reports that to the police and puts in a complaint against that. The police actually look into it, and they find that this man didn't do it, or find him innocent or something along those lines, and then they bring charges against Sneha for like false reporting or something like that. But basically they say to her, you won't have to spend any time in jail if you recant it and say, that it wasn't true. But she was adamant that it was true and that it happened, and she was not going to recant it. So she ended up spending like a night in jail because of it as well, and ended up having to go to court a bit later on. She also had, like I said, issues with alcohol, and would often go to like gay bars and end up going home with women from there and things like that. It was said, Ron said that she wasn't bisexual, she didn't go to have affairs and this, that, and the other. She went there because she was sick of men groping her and sick of all of that, and she wouldn't get that in the gay bars, obviously. And she was a very social person who just really enjoyed going back to other people's houses that she met on nights out, and would just stay out and sort of carry on with the fun. Not for any other reasons other than to be social and things like that and just have a good time. This is what Ron said anyway. And it was quite normal for Sneha to do that. You know, she would often just go out at night time, not even tell Ron, which he didn't appreciate. They actually had a chat about it, and he was like, you know, if you're gonna stay out, at least let me know. And she said she would, I believe. But yeah, it was something that she did quite frequently. She wouldn't come home until like the next day. Ron did say, though, that she would never ever cheat on him. Something to do with Sneha's brother, that he had actually reported walking in on Sneha and his girlfriend actually having intercourse. But then, when that actually came out, he said it never happened. But the police did actually put it on. Eventually, she goes missing, obviously, and they put it on the missing persons report as well. So I don't know whether they had text messages or something along those lines, but he denied that that ever happened and said it never did. There's quite a lot of that in this case. Like, one thing says, oh, you know, she was out on the booze all the time, going home with all these different women, and you'd think it was because she was cheating, or assume, but then Ron saying it's definitely not that. So, you know, and her parents saying it's definitely not that. So who actually knows? Ron did actually attend court with Sneha for, you know, the false, well, what the police claimed to be the false report of sort of the sexual harassment incident. So that occurred on the 10th of September in 2001. Sneha goes home after that because she was actually suspended from, I believe she got another contract actually somewhere else, and then she was suspended from that because she was supposed to go and see like an alcohol therapist, or I don't really know, words are hard sometimes and my brain doesn't work sometimes, but like someone along those lines, and she didn't actually go, so they suspended her. So on this day, obviously she was off as well because of the court case and the suspension, so she ends up going home and Ron goes to work. Sneha actually had her cousin coming down within the next 2 days, so she's just kind of tidying the apartment and doing a few things, getting it ready for when a cousin comes. At around 2 o'clock, she instant messages her mother. They talk for about 2 hours, and within this discussion, she actually mentioned how she might want to go up to something called the Windows of the World. It was like this restaurant on the top floor of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. So I believe that one of her friends or something was having a wedding there, and she wanted to test it out before that actually occurred. So she'd mentioned this in the conversation with her mum. And obviously you'll see why that's important in a little bit, or why it could be important. She didn't say when she was going, she just said sometime soon. So about 4 p.m. she says, excuse me, goodbye to her mum, and out she goes. She actually goes to do a bit of shopping. She leaves pretty much everything at home apart from Ron's American Express card, which she had permission to use. You know, they were married and it was theirs. So even though it was in his name, it was both of theirs. So she takes this card out and she goes out shopping. The apartment surveillance catches her leaving at 5:18 p.m. She drops off some dry cleaning and then goes to this store called Century 21, which is apparently one of her favourite clothing stores. Apparently this place is kind of really jumbled up, things are everywhere, and I've never been myself. This is just what I've seen in a couple of videos, but it was her favourite store to go to, and it was like one of them where you can probably really grab a bargain if you look hard enough. Anyway, it's a few blocks away and it's like right past the trade centre. She bought a few things. She's caught on CCTV camera buying these things. In total, it came to $550, which obviously she paid on the express card. Now, the shopper did actually say that they had seen her with another Indian woman who looked to be shopping with her, and that Sneha had introduced this woman as her friend. But not sure whether this was slightly a mistake or something along those lines, because, well, I'm not saying that is the reason as to why, but whoever this woman was never actually came forward to say that they were with Sneha or anything like that. Sneha. I keep changing her name now. I don't actually know which way it's pronounced, so I'm sorry about that. So yeah, this person never came forward. Whether she was actually with Sneha or not, who knows? That was the last confirmed sighting of Sneha. Now you can see that she is holding bags, which obviously had her shopping in. I mean, she'd spent $550. It's not like she spent a tenner. Those bags have never been found. Nobody knows what happened to them at all. And no one has seen her since. Ron came home at about midnight. He'd done a 12-hour shift. He was knackered. He came home. Sneha was not there. Again, not unusual for her. He was mad because they'd had a discussion as to, like I said, to let him know if she was staying out. And she hadn't done. But he's knackered. He's just thinking, I want to go to bed. She does this all the time. He wasn't worried, basically. And so he went to bed, thinking she would just come home in the morning. So he wakes up early the next day. It's September the 11th, 2001. He heads back to work at 8 a.m. His wife still has not yet returned home, but like I said, he got up early. He's probably thinking if she's had a drink, might be a bit rough or whatnot, and she's not going to come home very early, so off he goes to work. And of course, everybody knows what happens just shortly after that. Because on the 11th of September, 2001, at 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 crashes into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. 17 minutes later, at 9:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175 also crashes into the other tower. And of course, it left New York, Manhattan in just utter chaos. Now, in the beginning, when the first plane hit, because it wasn't quick succession, it wasn't that plane hit and that plane hit, people thought that it was an accident. People didn't assume that it was a terrorist attack. It wasn't. Sadly, terrorism is quite prevalent nowadays, but it wasn't then, and people didn't, that wasn't the first thought that crossed their mind. They were just like, oh my God, it was an accident, obviously. And so it was utter chaos. But then when the second one hit, they were thinking, something strange is going on. And eventually, obviously, I believe the other flight, the passengers actually managed to get back control of it, but then sadly they did actually crash, not into the intended target because they managed to get control of it, but they did crash, and sadly all of those people died too. So obviously the police and everyone was just so busy, and it was just utter chaos. And at this point, Ron is working at the hospital, so don't forget he lives like 2 blocks away from the World Trade Center. He tries ringing Sneha, no answer. He eventually makes the journey down. He manages to get a ride with an ambulance because he wants to check on his wife, because obviously she actually went missing on the 10th, the day before, technically, because he doesn't know whether she went out on a night out or not. So he goes home anyway, thinking that she'll probably be at home. The journey takes him 6 hours because it's absolute madness. When he gets to the apartment block, he can't actually get in because the doors are electric and the power's off, and so he can't get in. So he has like a red laser pen. He manages to get the attention of a neighbour, eventually, who he asks to go upstairs and just bang on his door and see whether Sneha's there. They do so, come back down, no answer. So Ron has no other choice but to leave because he can't actually get in. So he does. He goes and stays with a friend, and then the next day he goes back to the apartment block, and he does actually manage to get in this time. The doors are working again. Goes upstairs to his apartment, goes inside, and, there's just dust and debris everywhere because a window was left open 2 blocks away from the Trade Center. Obviously, the Twin Towers did collapse. They killed so many people. It was just such a devastating day in history. It's just so sad, and most people do remember that vividly. They remember exactly what they were doing on that day and where they was when the news hit. So yeah, some of that had flown in through the open window, and it left like a pile of dust on the floor, all over, coating everything. And so he's looking for footprints in this dust of Sneha, but there are none. The only footprints that you can see to prove that she was back, obviously, or that she'd been home at all, were cat paw prints, because they had 2 cats. However, you know, he would have assumed that she would have closed the window, she would have tried to tidy up a bit if she had been home, and it was just an absolute mess in there. So he realizes that she has still not been home, and he's really, really worried. Of course, he tries to report her as missing, but there are so many people missing at this point. The Twin Towers literally have been crashed into and destroyed, like fully destroyed. So can you imagine all those people in there, all those families ringing the police saying that my family member's missing and they were in the World Trade Center? All of these things, you know, it was absolute madness. Cell service was absolute garbage because, I mean, have you ever tried to send a text on New Year's? Like, Happy New Year? It doesn't go through, let me tell you, because there's that many people doing it all at the same time. It doesn't really go through, so it's all blocked up. Plus, one of the biggest cell towers there was actually on one of the Twin Towers, and obviously that had gone. So, cell service was pretty rubbish. And not only that, when Ron finally did manage to report Sneha as missing, the police were interested because she actually went missing the day before. They were only interested in people missing around the World Trade Center disaster. So, yeah, they didn't want to hear it. Basically, Ron then decided he should ask her brother to do like an interview to try and get somebody looking for her because nobody was. And he made a decision that he would later regret. Ron told him to not mention the date because every time somebody heard that she went missing on the 10th, nobody wanted to listen. But what he did, which, like I said, he did regret later because, I don't know why he did it personally. When he was told to not mention the date, well, he did mention the date. He said that basically Sneha rang him while she was at the World Trade Center helping people, telling him that she was helping people. I don't know. No idea. Well, I do. He wanted her to get attention. He wanted to get people to look for her, but it was really the wrong way to go about it because they were looking for her now, and she was in the media, but she was being hailed as a hero. But it kind of really hindered any investigation that the police could have had because it was a lie. It was a blatant lie. Nobody actually knows whether Sneha went to the World Trade Center. It's a theory, obviously, because she was a doctor. She lived not far away. She would have heard all of the chaos between the Twin Towers, and maybe she would have just ran over to try and help, like a lot of people did. And then obviously got caught up in the chaos and sadly died as a result of it. Maybe when the towers fell, I don't actually know. But yeah, basically, it is not known. So they look into all of this for ages. Her name is put on the victims list of the Twin Towers. The police don't get anywhere. I believe initially they thought it was a murder investigation, but then they aligned more with that she was a victim of the Trade Center terrorist attack. The family ended up hiring a private detective, and this is where the private detective discovered the footage of her in that store, and they said that, the clerk said that she was shopping with another woman, potentially, but like I said, this woman hasn't ever come forward. They also discovered some footage that was in the apartment block. Now, the sun was shining in a certain way, and it was glaring the camera, so you can't tell who this person is properly. But this person looked similar to Sneha, was wearing similar clothes to Sneha, ended up going into the apartment block, I believe to the elevator or something like that. And this was within 5 minutes or so of the first plane hitting. This person is stood there for a bit and then just leaves, like never goes in. But what I find very strange as to whether that was Sneha is they never had any shopping bags. So obviously Sneha was last known to be shopping with her 2 bags. She spent quite a decent amount of money on it. And so you would have thought that she would have wanted to get them home if she was heading to her apartment. But this person didn't have the bags. It's not confirmed as to whether that was Sneha or not. So who actually knows, because of the sun glare, which is really frustrating. Now, I believe Ron does have this footage, but he never released it to the public. Again, I don't really know why. I think he believes that it is Sneha, but I'm not sure. And obviously, it's thought that maybe if it was her, she heard all of the happenings with the plane and ran outside to find out what on earth was going on, and then ran in to help. So Ron did really look for her. He used his credentials to get into the triage tents and things like that, hoping that he would find her, that she was a victim, and that he would eventually find her, but he never did. It's also important to note that Sneha's, the American Express card that Sneha used in the store, Ron's card, that was never ever used again. That was the final purchase on it, and it has never been used again. But yeah, that's the end of it. If you guys have enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for similar content. Anyway, that's all I have today on the case. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.